This podcast is brought to you by WRFL, Radio Free Lexington. Find us online at wrfl.fm. Catch us on your FM radio while you're in Central Kentucky at 88.1 FM all the way to the left. Thank you for listening, and please be sure to subscribe.
Welcome to From the Woods, Kentucky. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Lhotka. Today in studio, we have Chad Niman. Chad is a primary forest product specialist in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Kentucky. It's a pleasure to have you in studio today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk about small-scale logging in your small-scale logging program today. And before we get started talking about that, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at UK.
So my background is in forest management and silviculture, as well as forest markets and grading systems with a little bit of wood science and anatomy mixed in there. So with UK, I work directly with the logging and sawmill workforce to help meet the industry needs related to any kind of technical assistance they might have, training and information transfer, mostly with market and regulatory changes. And so I work in that primary segment of the forest products, which includes logging in the woods through transportation to the mill, all that handling and processing into lumber, veneer, ties, and cants, which is essentially just a square cut out of the center of the log just to hold that juvenile wood or the pith in the center to keep that young wood from the beginning of the tree from creating any kind of reactions in that wood.
Okay.
All kinds of other products, as well as all the storage and maintaining quality of those products as they start to dry. And so in this capacity, I don't often get a chance to engage woodland owners and farmers, so I really enjoy getting to do that with the small-scale logging program we're going to talk about today.
Okay. So tell us, what is small-scale logging? Before we get into the details of the program, just what is it?
So at a basic level, small-scale logging is just harvesting or salvaging trees off your property using implements that you could readily use with a farm tractor or a four-wheeler, something that a lot of woodland owners and farmers might already have available on their property.
So hence small scale.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly.
So what is the small scale logging program?
So every year, the small-scale logging program is designed to showcase several different pieces of small equipment, different options that are available on the market. And so some can easily be operated by hand, some safely attached to an ATV, a side-by-side, farm tractor, or truck. And so the length and depth of material that's going to be in each of these shows depends on the year, because every 2 years the Kentucky Wood Expo occurs, and so we like to put on a shorter version there. It's more of a small-scale logging equipment demo that we do at the Expo. But the real magic happens on years when the Wood Expo is not happening. That's when we get to expand on that small-scale logging program. We take it on the road. We use the help of the Kentucky Division of Forestry, different local county extension offices, and most importantly, a private woodland owner who has that personal experience in harvesting and marketing their own timber. So being a forester at heart, it's enjoyable to have a full-day program that starts with some knowledge and chainsaw safety and felling. And you go through working with a forester to make and implement silvicultural management, different management decisions on the landscape, discussing different treatment options and timing for non-native invasive plants, safe salvage and harvesting practices and techniques that you would use with that small-scale equipment. This stuff can be very challenging in stands that have had blowdown or ice storm damage, as you can imagine. And so then we talk through marketing logs to local mills, how you do business with local sawmill log buyers, how you establish prices and quality requirements based on those mills' specs and needs, as well as bucking or cutting those logs to certain lengths that the mills require, how different quality of logs are merchandised into different markets, as well as how to approximate values based on those available markets. So this year it'll be a 2-hour show. and it'll feature only the equipment with a short talk on chainsaw safety, and it's going to be at the Kentucky Wood Expo on September 21st, which is a Saturday. We will be doing a preview of the show for county extension agents and any of their clients Friday, September 20th, and that's going to be a part of that timber economics program, which will also be at the Kentucky Wood Expo.
And so, just real quick, tell us what the Kentucky Wood Expo is.
It's a show for manufacturers and vendors of logging and sawmill equipment to be able to showcase their goods to the industry, as well as farmers and woodland owners that want to demo and check out small wood processing equipment. UK Forestry Department has been involved in providing woodland owner and industry training there for years, and we will be there again this year. A popular booth at this expo is the Make Your Own Cutting Board Workshop, made from a variety of hardwood species that are sourced from Kentucky. So folks get to participate in that after they watch an educational video about the forests of Kentucky that covered nearly half our state. And other events there will include chainsaw carving, different timber sport competitions, and large equipment competitions. They even have included a woodcraft section where local artisans can sell their goods, so there's a pretty wide variety of things to do there if you haven't been out to that show before.
Yeah, and I know we've been out for
Yes.
several years.
Several
It's
years.
great. You know,
Yes.
people of all ages, there's a lot of things to do. And, you know, a lot of those things that you mentioned are a lot of fun for parents and kids and, you know, everyone to go to.
A lot of big
So,
equipment too that kids
Yeah.
can go and look at, and different items that go on. So who might be interested in a program like this?
Anyone is welcome to attend, but primarily woodland owners and farmers would attend, as they are who own the majority of woodlands in Kentucky. Most of these folks often already own a tractor, a four-wheeler, or a side-by-side, or a pickup truck. So it's really an easier adoption process for them in using these implements that can help them move logs around the farm safely and efficiently. Someone without this equipment could, after attending this full-day program, know what equipment to get and get set up, as well as be able to pencil out the economics. They often learn this is very hard work, though, which they will not get rich doing, and that allows them to have more control over the management of their woodlands and to be more engaged as a woodland owner. And so people who are thinking about logging their own woods or having a commercial harvest can benefit from the experience from others' trial and error, and they come away with a great respect for all that hard work and value of using a good logging professional in addition to a knowledgeable forester. Logging is the most dangerous profession there is by a long shot, and so even far more dangerous than commercial fishing, and logs are heavy and difficult to move without experience. So safety and use of personal protective equipment are critical, and those are all things that they can learn through going through this.
And so tell us a little bit about, you mentioned it's for woodland owners and some farmers. What would be the threshold of acres of land, or something that, you know, might say, okay, that's a reasonable amount, I could do it myself, or okay, I have way too much, or, you know, so I'm just curious what that might look like.
That's
I
a
know
really
it's not
good
between
question.
small scale logging
Yeah.
and getting a logger, pretty
Right.
much.
Yes, I really don't believe there's any barrier to that. I think you could have like 1 acre and be able to, if you had a tractor already or a four-wheeler with a simple setup, be able to salvage or harvest these trees. Obviously, the more you have, the economy of scale, you know, you'll be able to market more of this timber or more of these trees. But I believe anybody would be able to do this.
Okay.
No
Yeah,
matter
that's
what
good.
size.
Yeah, no matter what size their
Just if you
property
wanted
is.
to do it over a period of time, it may take a little longer if you did it that way.
You
But
could have 1
if you
acre.
had 1,000 acres.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you've mentioned or used the terms both salvage and harvest.
Yes.
Can you explain those and how they're similar or different?
Yes. So a typical commercial harvest would just be, you know, standing trees that are of a mature size, and you would have somebody come in and harvest those or harvest them yourself. With a salvage, these are trees that have come down due to natural death. You know, trees have a limited lifespan, just like humans do, but you also have things like blowdown from heavy winds, tornadoes, a lot of ice storm damage that we've had several years back. All of these, can bring a lot of trees down, and so that's when you get the salvage harvest, and those can be very difficult to conduct. As you can imagine, trees all twisted up and trees lodged in other trees, and so the danger level goes up when you get in those salvage harvest situations, but it's definitely a great thing to utilize that material.
Okay, no, good. Thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned that, it could be for people, landowners with any size. Tell us a little bit about, and we've talked about it on some of our shows, but maybe for our new listeners, tell us about the private woodland ownership here in Kentucky.
So overall, 88% of Kentucky's woodlands are privately owned, and of that, about 76% are in what we call small private family ownership. So that's, small families that often live there on the property. These are our friends, neighbors, coworkers, folks who might own, 15, 30, 100 acres or more. And as I mentioned farmers earlier, almost 60% of our row crop and cattle farms have got woodlands on their property. And more than a quarter of our forested acres are found on these farms around the state. And nearly half the state, 49%, is in forest, and we have woodlands in all 120 of our counties.
Earlier you mentioned the mature tree. Is there an age for a mature tree, or does it just depend?
It can vary quite a bit. In Kentucky, we typically think in the central hardwoods region where we're at, somewhere between 70 to 120 years usually will get you to a mature tree. Some folks will base it on a diameter. If you're looking on the very low end for what you would consider a mature tree in hardwoods, 16 inches around, where you're getting to where you can barely reach around that tree is where it's what you would consider beginning to become mature. And obviously they can get much larger than that as they continue to grow.
And you're talking about hardwoods. What constitutes a hardwood?
And so hardwoods are your deciduous trees with broad leaves. And so you've got your conifers with needles, and those are your softwoods. It may not sound real intuitive just off hardwood and softwood. But you've got broad leaves, which is your hardwoods, and you've got needles and cones for your softwoods.
All right. So you did one of these small-scale logging programs in Moorhead last fall. So tell us a little bit about that program that took place.
Yes, it was a fun program. We worked with a woodland owner by the name of Lhotka, and so we were able to learn from his experience over more than 2 decades of salvaging, merchandising, and selling over 200,000 board feet of trees that naturally reached the end of their life, uprooted, blew down in windstorms, lots of ice storm damage, and he actually marketed and sold these to local mills around the Moorhead area. So Walt, he's a truly special Kentuckian. He's got over 300 acres under active management, lots of wildlife and rare plant restoration work that he's done on his land. His property is very close to the boundary of the Daniel Boone National Forest. And so Walt, his woodlands, they're mature oak hickory forest, lots of white oak, red oak, yellow poplar, and other deciduous hardwood species. And he's got some open grasslands that he's got spread throughout there as well.
It's kind of a mixture of things.
It's a really neat mix of open and really mature forest. And so the property, it's frequented by lots of well-known species, wildlife species like turkey, deer, quail, and even black bears. He utilizes lots of limb and top material for firewood, which he burns in his home and his shop there on the farm. And with his bandsaw mill, he even makes his own lumber for the farm and for different woodworking purposes. He's an avid woodworker, and so he likes to work in his shop with wood from his own property. He even has a solar kiln on the property for speeding up that process of drying that moisture out of his lumber for his personal use. We also had KDF, Kentucky Division of Forestry, foresters out there, Josh Frazier and Floyd Willis, who helped to lead that discussion conversation on the management services and those options that are available to small private landowners and what those benefits of good forest management are. So Josh personally has over a decade of experience with this particular property and working with Walt to be able to meet his land objectives be able to make good, sound forest management decisions. Along with the equipment demonstrations and discussion from Walt and myself, I discussed how to measure board footage, length of logs, and cutting decisions for folks to be able to understand why they would make certain bucking and cutting decisions on those logs, as well as some of the grading knowledge to help a landowner better understand that quality and the subsequent value of what they've got. So I really appreciated having recently retired Bob Wofford to assist with discussing the markets and working with local log buyers. Bob has experience of over 40 years buying logs for sawmills in that Moorhead area, and he was a wealth of information. We also received a lot of local support and behind-the-scenes support while running the program from that Rowan County Extension agent, Bob Marsh.
It sounds like you had a lot of people helping you with this program as well.
It
A lot of
made-
our partners, too.
It made everything come together, having everyone engaged and involved, and it really made for a special program. We even had a few master loggers that attended the program, and so having them in the conversation was really nice for those landowners.
Enhance the conversation a little bit.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to From the Woods, Kentucky with co-hosts Renee and Laura. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome to Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. This is Dr. Matt Springer. I'm an Assistant Extension Professor of Wildlife Management within the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources here at University of Kentucky. I'm here to teach you a little bit about the animals that live in our forests, especially those here in Kentucky. For those of you who might just be joining us, each week we'll play a wildlife sound from our forest. Here's our sound for this week. Stay tuned. Towards the end of the show, we'll talk about this animal and why it is making that sound.
Welcome back to From the Woods, Kentucky. Let's get back to our interview.
Let's back up a little bit, and you mentioned a solar kiln. What is that?
There are some different plans that you can get online. It's essentially a structure that you would put lumber into, and using sunlight be able to speed up the drying process. Within this box, it speeds up, it helps to hold in all that heat, and it pushes that extra moisture out. Now, as you can imagine, it's under the power of the sun, so it's not consistent, and so you wouldn't likely want to be selling this kind of lumber out there on the free market due to inconsistency of the moisture, or you'd have to be very careful with regulating that moisture.
Right.
But if you're just going to be using it yourself and you want to dry some lumber, it's a really easy and inexpensive method for doing that. And you can even install some fans to help speed up that process and get the moisture out. But it's essentially just a box that captures that sunlight and lets the wood dry at a faster rate.
So people may not know that wood has to be dried before it goes off to lumber companies. How long does that process usually take?
It depends. If you're air drying it, it could take 2 years to be able to get that moisture down if you were only going to air dry it, and that would get you somewhere close to 14% moisture content. If you were using a solar kiln, you might be able to get it down to 12% within 6 or 7 months, depending upon the time of year. If you are putting it into a dry kiln, some species could go right into a commercial electric dry kiln or boiler powered dry kiln, and they would be able to dry that lumber in 3 or 4 weeks down to 7 or 8% moisture content. With oaks, they have a lot of degrade issues, and they end up having a lot of splitting that happens in that wood if you dry it too fast. And so you typically have to air dry that down to about 30% moisture content. And then you would finish it off for a couple of weeks in a dry kiln to be able to get it down to that 7 or 8% moisture content that you really want to have in lumber that you're going to be using in a finished furniture piece.
Yeah, so if you're just going out and buying lumber, there's been a long process that's happened before you could even buy that piece of wood.
Absolutely. A lot of people have handled that material and processed
I don't think a lot
that
of people
material.
have thought about that.
I think it's a well-kept secret out there just how much is involved behind the scenes in making, a table at IKEA or
That might be
hardwood
another
flooring.
show that we do on, what's the process of drying lumber,
It's very
from
involved.
tree to your table.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, and one thing I think is interesting about this program that you mentioned is that it does take it from their tree or the woodlands, and if somebody is inclined and is self-sufficient to do this, they can cut down their tree, dry it, and use it, and it never
Make a
leave
table if they want.
never
That's
leave
a
their
great point.
farmland. So, I think for those people that want to do a lot themselves, this is a way they can process their own wood without it ever leaving their property. So
Absolutely.
that's great. So with that, there's obviously they're going to need to have certain equipment and
Right.
things like that. So can you tell us about what types of equipment somebody might need, or what might be on display at the small scale logging program that people could see? And
Definitely. We try to cover a wide spectrum of different tools and implements. Some can be used by hand, just utilizing leverage, like a cant hook. It's a simple stick with a hook on the end that helps you roll logs around. There are also some log arches that have handles that allow you to pick up and move logs relatively short distances. There are a log skid plate is just a simple steel plate that leverages the pole from an ATV or side-by-side to pick up the front end of a log, which reduces that skid impact and resistance. So lifting up one end of the log and reducing that impact and resistance is the basic principle for many of these log moving implements. It makes the practice much safer and reduces the impact. Other arch assemblies can be properly attached to ATVs, trucks, and side-by-sides to help move those logs around. We also have a logging winch that can attach to a 40 horsepower tractor. It has hydraulics to easily lift and skid logs up out of the woods. We also have a grapple arm log loading trailer, and that can be attached to a tractor or even a 1-ton pickup truck, and you can load and haul logs. That grapple loader even has a winch mounted to the side of it. It helps you to bring those logs closer to the grapple arm to be loaded into the trailer.
Sounds like there's a lot of different equipment that someone could buy to help them with this. And so what are some of the benefits that someone could get to going to a program like this?
So we have some resilient people in Kentucky for sure, but it's important to support that know-how and equipment that actually make that log handling and moving around easier. It's also important for our woodland owners and farmers to know something about the quality of materials and markets that are available for their trees. Can't stress enough how dangerous logging, especially salvage logging, can be. The landowners can see what is involved, make a decision as to what level of involvement and time invested that they want to have with the management and the harvesting on their property, as well as understand the real value of a knowledgeable logging professional. I would also add that they are more aware of the services provided by foresters working for the state and private consulting foresters who work for landowners.
So if somebody is interested in kind of harvesting their land and want to use a professional, what would be some advice you would give them?
Using professional services that are available to you, just as you would a realtor, an accountant, or a lawyer. One of these options is the Kentucky Division of Forestry. They have offices and foresters around the state. If you do a quick Google search for the Kentucky Division of Forestry, it'll provide contact information for the regional office that's in your area. These foresters can visit your land, they can provide recommendations, they can provide volumes, and all of this can be packaged in the form of a management plan. So as employees of the state, they cannot provide values to you. But another option that's available is a consulting forester. These consulting foresters are private businesses. They provide appraisals. They can also generate management plans. And they even have the ability to market your timber, your forest resources, your trees that are on your property, and oversee that harvest activity on the property. and they're on a commission basis, much like a realtor. So if you check out the Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters website, which is kacf.org, you can see if a consultant works in your area and if they'll be willing to take on that work. Now, there are parts of the state where we have few or no consulting foresters operating, so some landowners may have to get more creative in marketing their wood. Some other options, depending upon references and credibility of that professional, like anyone, if you're going to get a realtor or an attorney, you should do a little bit of homework first.
Mm-hmm.
You would work with a logger or even a mill timber buyer, and if you use these methods, we advise using a simple contract just to protect yourself from liability and to be clear for both sides what the outcome and expectations will be. So landowners can use the Kentucky Master Logger website to be able to check and see if a potential logger is designated as a bad actor, which means that they have fines from unpaid water quality violations on other properties prior to working with them. That's an extra little check and balance just to see if someone has previously been operating as they should and if they're up to date with those fines. So that's good to know that that's a resource out there.
Can you tell us where the show will be again and what those dates were?
So the Kentucky Wood Expo will be at Masterson Station Park here in Lexington again this year. This year it will be a 2-hour show featuring only the equipment with a short talk on chainsaw safety, and it's going to be the morning of September 21st, and that is a Saturday. We will be doing a preview of the show for the county extension agents and any of their clients Friday, September 20th, as part of that timber economics program, which is also going to be at the Kentucky Wood Expo. So come on out on Saturday or talk to your local county extension agent to see if they will be bringing a van of folks from your county down for that timber economics program the day before.
So do you have any final words you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Yes, forest products are biodegradable, they're easily recyclable, and they're renewable, meaning that they grow back. So in the heart of the central hardwoods region where we are located, trees naturally regenerate after natural death, disturbance, and harvest. So making products from trees helps to keep value in private woodlands. It reduces that developmental or land use conversion pressure while providing goods that we need in our daily lives, which over 2,500 different products actually. We should continue to strive to create these products out of renewable sources so we can reduce our landfill and environmental impact for future generations and as our population grows globally. And most importantly, keep forests as forests.
All right. Well, thank you, Chad, for coming in today. We greatly appreciate it. And if you'd like more information on anything we talk about today, please visit our website at www.fromthewoodsky.org. Stay tuned now for Wildlife Sounds from the Forest.
Welcome back to Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. I'm Dr. Matt Springer, Assistant Extension Wildlife Professor in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. Before I tell you what that sound was you heard at the beginning of the show, let's play it again for you.
Okay, so this one is a baseball bird.
Yes, so this is it, yeah, and being from the East, it's one that I grew up with, and it's the Baltimore Oriole, which obviously there's a baseball team,
Right.
which, takes the name. And the name itself actually comes from the crest of the English Baltimore family that the city of Baltimore is named after. The colors of the crest actually are on the bird. So that black and yellow, orange colors all come from that crest of that family in England, and it transferred over here.
Okay.
So they're actually a quite pretty bird.
So what kind of nests do they build?
So these guys actually make a really, really intricate nest. They're a weaver, and they'll make a nest. They'll basically build it off of a tree limb, and they'll weave almost like a hanging sock. And it's really, it takes them some time. I mean, it can take them a week to 2 weeks or more to put this nest together.
Wow.
Together, and it's mostly out of things like grass or grapevine bark or potentially horsehair, animal hair they find, or if you leave a thing of twine out in your yard and they see
love it.
they potentially will grab that and throw it in there. I mean, there's even fishing line if they're around that and they find that, they'll weave it right in there with it as well, and actually probably happens fairly frequently because these guys are found in park-like settings, orchards, that open area under trees with more mature trees around. That's kind of what they like.
So, any reason why they hang their nests?
It's probably a predator avoidance thing,
okay.
More than anything else would be my guess.
Okay.
I'm not, unfortunately, a ornithologist that knows a lot about bird evolution.
Right.
But that would be my guess.
Okay. And how many eggs do they?
So they actually they put all their eggs in one basket to be to go with the pun I made last time.
Right.
So they will only have one brood a year, which is really not a lot for these guys. It is kind of putting all your hope into that, and probably has something to do with how long it takes them to build a nest and the energy associated with it. So in that nest, they'll have anywhere between 3 and 7 eggs. It's a once and done affair, unfortunately. They are a longer lived species. The oldest one on record is 12 years old, and it was actually found in Minnesota when it got killed by a hawk.
Oh.
Which is part of life
Part
as
of
a
life,
bird.
but still, it was 12 years old.
They're not high on the food chain.
Right.
But they are only found here in the spring and summer. So they are breeding season bird. So they migrate down south into Central America and South America. So they're not here all the time. However, they're ones that you could be in a park and they'll fly and sit over the tree 10 feet above your head and get a really good look at them. You can actually feed them in your backyard.
In your backyard.
Yep. They're not ones that like seeds. They're an insect eater in some ways, and then also similar to hummingbirds, they actually like sugar water and sweets. So you can actually put a little bit of jelly out, or have the sugar water, or they have the feeders that have this. You can put oranges on it that are cut, and they'll come and get that, and they're after the sweet water and the orange as well. But they'll respond to the feeders quite easily if they're around.
And how far do they migrate? You said
down central and south.
And then how far north?
So they'll go up traditionally prairies and east. So they'll get up into the Canadian prairies, almost over towards the Rockies as it goes up and over towards the west to the Rocky Mountains, but not too far into Canada, but a little bit.
And what other colors did you say they were?
So you've got orange, black, and a little bit of yellow. The males are very bright, that black wings, black head with some white bars on the wings, and then that bright orange chest. And the yellow kind of is in there with the tail feathers a little bit. The females are dulled out quite a bit. And then,
typical, right?
Yes, typical. We're trying to stay alive in the nest so you don't draw attention to yourself.
Exactly.
And there will be some juvenile plumage in there that's a little more dulled out and a little more yellow before they get into that adult plumage. So your year-old birds aren't going to be that bright orange. They're a bird to go see if you haven't seen one, to try to find, because they're a really pretty bird.
Yeah, and what size do they get to?
They're one of the bigger birds. They're going to be a little bit bigger than a robin.
Oh, okay.
They're a little more slender than a robin, but they are probably a little bit taller.
How long do the baby birds stay in the nest?
Typical.
Or is it typical?
3-ish week incubation, and then it takes them a little bit longer to get out of there as nestlings. So
if they have 7, do they all typically make it? Or do you know?
I don't know. I'm guessing that
probably not.
Like everything else, it's in good years maybe. In bad years probably not.
Yeah.
Go take a look. I'm sure they're out at Jacobson Park or
right,
in the
exactly.
cemetery. Those are the perfect places to see them. I saw one last week when I was at Salado in Frankfurt. There was one buzzing around the parking lot there singing his head off.
Well, that's good. So you can easily see these guys.
There are ones that you can definitely see in towns.
All right. Well, great. Thanks for telling us about them.
Thank you for joining us today. We have a new show scheduled for summer 2019. You can listen to us live on WRFL Lexington 88.1 FM on Thursdays from 10 a.m. until noon. And at 10 a.m. we'll be playing a new episode. Then at 11 a.m. we'll play a show from our archives. So stay tuned to 2 shows this summer on Thursdays. If you miss our show on Thursdays, you can listen to all of our podcasts on our website at www.fromthewoodsky.org.
Hey there. If you're enjoying this podcast from WRFL Lexington, you may enjoy our live radio stream at WRFL.FM and, of course, via radio at 88.1 FM in the Central Kentucky area. We have a wide variety of programs you're sure to enjoy. Just go to WRFL.FM/schedule and see what programs appeal most to you. Thanks again for listening to this podcast from WRFL Lexington.